Please welcome David Gellis back to the stage with his guests, Kate Brandt, Chief Sustainability Officer at Google, and Melanie Nakagawa, Chief Sustainability Officer and Corporate Vice President at Microsoft.
Going to get going as people continue to take their seats.
And they're fully caffeinated, so this is great.
Fully caffeinated, yes. People are going to be leaning in for this conversation. I've been covering business and technology for almost 20 years now. And even early on, it was clear that big tech companies, notably Microsoft, Google, were among the actors in corporate America that were the quickest to really lean in to the issue of climate change, setting really ambitious climate targets, working to deploy renewable energy, publicly advocating for these causes. That has been, I think, a through line of the stories of your companies for the last decade plus. We find ourselves, though, in a very different moment. We're at a moment where emissions at both of your companies are rising, thanks in part to the demands of AI, both the physical infrastructure as well as the energy demands. And of course, we're in a very different political moment. And that's where I want to begin today. 8 years ago, when President Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, both of your CEOs publicly went on the record and said they didn't agree with this decision. Earlier this year, when the same thing happened, we didn't hear those kind of remarks from either CEO. Instead, what we've seen is tech companies working with the administration, which is understandable in plenty of ways, but sitting down at the White House talking about the merits of AI. And of course, this is happening at an administration that is penalizing the renewable industry and promoting fossil fuels. And so, without asking you to answer for each one of those specifics, I want to understand how companies like Microsoft and Google are working in this environment. How do you keep moving forward on these issues that you have professed to care about, have demonstrated you care about, at a moment when the political environment is making it very challenging for corporate actors to do just that? Kate, let me start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having us this morning. This work, as you noted, for us, we're in our third decade of doing this work, and it truly transcends politics and political cycles. We remain very committed to pursuing our moonshots in this space. We're a global company. We need to work with governments around the world. And what we really do is seek to find common ground in areas where we can advance progress. What we see here in the U.S. today is we need to continue to accelerate the deployment of a variety of advanced energy technologies, things like enhanced geothermal, advanced nuclear, long-duration storage. We found this to be a great area of collaboration with the administration. We also see tremendous opportunity for new policies to unlock the grid further, to speed up permitting reform, to make better use of the existing infrastructure we have, advanced grid technologies like reconductoring that can get you twice the throughput with your existing lines. And also the need to train electrical workers. We need a workforce. So we see that as a really key place of a policy agenda that we want to collaborate on.
And Melanie, how about you? How is Microsoft finding ways to work in this environment and continue to advocate for things like solar? I mean, you guys have been champions of this industry, and now we see the White House really going after renewables, including wind and solar. Do you stand up and say, hey, by the way, White House, we're not fully supportive of these policies?
We also take a similarly sort of long-term view. Microsoft had our 50th birthday this year, and we learned a lot in the last 50 years. We've worked with many administrations, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Like Kate, we are a global business, and we have to operate in many different countries. And a lot of times what that means is finding ways to find that common ground with different administrations. One thing we're also really clear on is when we set our commitment in 2020 to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste, these are enduring commitments that really span multiple administrations. So in order to stay steadfast in that commitment, we have to advocate for policies that are enduring in nature, that aren't beholden to any one political cycle or another. So moving forward with advancing carbon-free energy, these are multi-year contracts. These are contracts that are going to be coming into fruition years past any one administration. So for Microsoft, we've actually grown our clean energy portfolio. In 2020, we did around 1.8 gigawatts total that year. And then last year we announced we've grown that to over 34 gigawatts. Mm-hmm. These are the types of bets we make that will show up in 2030, 2031, and through 2035. And it's really important that we can make these investments happen. We work really closely with utilities to do that. And I'm really just focused on ensuring that we can reach these goals and work with the administration and many of the policies that Kate mentioned, from workforce and skilling to energy grid growth. I think there's a lot of common ground that we just need to add more energy to the grids, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And companies play a really important role in providing that.
And so to that end, both of your CEOs, and I promise we won't spend the whole time on politics, nevertheless, there was this meeting just a couple weeks ago. It was about AI. We had the leaders of many of the nation's top tech companies, including your CEOs, around the table with the president, with the vice president. What was the message they gave to them, whether it was on the record or on the sidelines, about what you need from an energy perspective? Because we're at this moment where we've heard pledges to pursue an all-of-the-above energy strategy from this administration, and yet we see them saying, President Trump said he's not going to approve any new solar or wind projects. Were your CEOs able to convey the message to the administration that that's not going to help you guys get what you need from an AI and a business perspective?
I think what we see is there's an appreciation that we need to unlock more energy capacity in this country, and that's going to be critical to deploying AI, which will have tremendous benefits in terms of economic growth, scientific advances, and even solving some of the world's greatest challenges like climate change. And so, again, I think what we're really focused on is where can we find that common ground? Where can we advance new, firm energy solutions? We're seeing a tremendous renaissance now in nuclear energy. This is something we've been talking about for a long time. This is something both of our companies have been really invested in. That's the work we're doing with firms like Kairos Power to deploy small modular reactors, 500 megawatts across an order book, our first one, in Tennessee Valley Authority, working with Elemental Power on 3 different sites. We hope to get to 600 megawatts. Deploying these technologies is what we need. And again, I think the message is we need to get more clean, firm power on the grid. It needs to be reliable, which means we need to unlock the grid and get capacity deployed more rapidly, and that we need the policy enablers to do that.
And is that a message you're also able to deliver to the White House?
It is another key. Obviously, when it comes to nuclear power, we announced last year our partnership with Constellation Energy to bring back 3 Mile Island's nuclear power capacity. And what's exciting about that deal and that partnership is for 3 Mile Island, which had 2 reactors, Unit 2 was the one that was shut down in 1979, but Unit 1 stayed online through 2019. And so it's bringing back Unit 1, which is a workforce story for that region. It's over 823 megawatts of clean, firm power coming back onto that grid when it wasn't there to serve a load to that grid that is actually an AI growing grid, not just for us, but for others in the region. So I think that's really exciting. The other key piece that we focused a lot on is what's coming out of these data centers. What are they doing? And for the U.S. federal government, there are ways you can use AI for faster permitting, helping upskill the workforce to move faster with this clean energy work. And there's lots of areas where actually the federal government use of AI can really benefit accelerating the energy transition.
Okay, well, we'll hear more from Energy Secretary Wright this afternoon. Melanie, you mentioned earlier Microsoft's climate goals. They were, when they came out, and I think to this day remain, some of the most ambitious in corporate America. Carbon negative by 2030, 100% renewable energy by 2025, removing all historical carbon emissions by 2050. And yet, in recent months, you've acknowledged that data center electricity use could more than double by 2030, driven in part by AI. And last year, emissions were up. So I think we see these numbers, and it really makes many people question just how achievable some of those goals are. Can you still make them?
So we remain steadfast in our commitment. And let me break that down into some more plain English. So we have this goal to be carbon negative by 2030. What does that entail? It really involves 2 parts. Reducing the amount of energy and emissions that we're putting out as a company as much as possible, and then removing the rest. And what we've learned over the last 5 years since setting this goal is we got some success along the way. So we're on track to hit by the end of this year, the matching of renewable energy across our loads. The other piece that we're seeing really significant progress is when you break down where our actual footprint comes from. The emissions that we announced earlier this year, interestingly, 97%, so the majority of that footprint is actually coming from our value chain, which means companies like ours and Kate's, we're doing a lot of work to ensure that we're powering our assets with as much carbon-free power as possible. And then when it comes to the value chain, that 97%, it really is about what are the largest sources of the environmental footprint that come from it. It's things like the chips you put into your data centers. It's the building materials. It's the fuel that's used to fly products and people around the world. and it's our procurement. And so there was some really good progress across each of those. I won't drain it, but I'll just share one that came out recently this week, which was the work we're doing to advance low-carbon building materials. It's so critical. We're going to build more data centers. They come with carbon when you build them. So where's the progress? And what gets me really excited is that we are seeing incredible companies that are building low-carbon cement and designing for low-carbon steel. And this week, we announced our work with Stegra. It's a steel company. It's 95% lower carbon steel than conventional steel. And we announced 2 transactions with them to procure actual physical supply of it for our supply chain, as well as the environmental attribute certificates for that value chain. So it's these different types of scenarios and wedges that we're planning for out to 2030 and beyond that give us this confidence that we can actually hit these goals. It'll take a lot of people's work working together, but we see a path to get there.
You wrote earlier this year that your sustainability goals were a moonshot, and you said that you have to acknowledge that the moon has gotten further away. So are you still going to hit those goals?
So you have to build a faster rocket ship, and we are. And the way that looks is take carbon removal. We went from pretty much 0 carbon removal in 2020 when we announced our moonshot, and last year we announced we've contracted for over 30 million tons of carbon removal. So that is a much faster rocket ship than we thought in 2020. And again, you're seeing this across each of those major wedges: steel, clean energy, cement, removal.
Okay. Kate, is the moon getting further away for Google as well? And I ask because emissions were also up for you for the last couple of years. And someone noted, I believe, that you recently removed the pledge to actually be carbon net zero neutral from the website recently. And I think people saw that and they said, oh, is this sort of some green hushing, if you will? Is this the company saying, we're not going to make a big hay of it, but we're actually rolling back some of these goals?
So we absolutely remain dedicated to our moonshots as well. And what we like to say at Google is we like hard problems. And we see these goals that we've set for ourselves, wanting to operate our offices and data centers on 24/7 carbon-free energy, wanting to be net zero across our operations and value chain, are equally as challenging as moonshots we've set, like self-driving cars. And the reason we do that is not only do we want to make progress, do we want to absolutely reduce our own emissions, do we want to work with our suppliers to enable them to decarbonize, we also want to accelerate whole industries to decarbonize. We want to see electricity decarbonize. We want to see progress in carbon removal technologies. So yes, we want to work towards our goals, but that's actually not enough. We want to be an early adopter to see cost curves come down, to see deployment accelerating. So just to go into the numbers for a moment, what we saw last year is that when it comes to our own footprint, our own data center electricity emissions, which there's rightfully been a lot of focus on, those actually decreased last year by 12%, even though our electricity consumption was up 27%. So what that means is we're able to start to disaggregate that growth. And that's, again, through deploying 8 gigawatts last year alone of contracts, more than we've done in any other year. And we've just talked about advanced nuclear. That's also things like enhanced geothermal, using the heat of the earth to create clean, firm power, long duration storage, where we're making investments in companies like Energy Dome, working with utilities to do utility-led pilots in that space. So a tremendous amount of work there, and our carbon-free energy usage going up from 64 to 66%. But as Melanie noted, a lot of our footprint resides in our value chain. And there also, in addition to needing to decarbonize things like building materials and fuels, we also need to get greater access to carbon-free energy in regions like the Asia Pacific, where a lot of our value chain lies. We need to partner with suppliers. We need new models. Like we recently worked with BlackRock on a project to bring on 1 gigawatt of solar power in Taiwan that we can give access to our suppliers. So a lot of work left to be done, but we are seeing good progress, and we feel like it's having these kind of moonshots that enables us to focus, to innovate, to partner, and to work across whole industries. As it relates to our website, we remain absolutely committed to these goals. Our environmental report is the place where we talk about all of this work, where we share progress against our goals. It's prominently featured on our website. We have really cool AI tools that you can use to interact with the report. So our website, it's meant to be plain spoken. It's meant to focus on progress, to reach a broad audience. All the work's still there.
So even if it's not on the website or that specific website, the goal is still intact?
The goal is absolutely intact, and our report is very prominently featured, and that's where we share all of this information.
Okay. Well, let's talk a bit more about where this power is coming from. You just mentioned 3 Mile Island. That's a really unique story. I mean, raises all sorts of questions about where nuclear has been for the last 20 years as we're finding ourselves really power-hungry moment. But you also said earlier this year, Melanie, that you'd be willing to power data centers with natural gas. Now, natural gas is a big part of all our lives, whether we realize it or not. But this, to me, raises sort of a more fundamental question. And this tension between some of these climate goals and the business prerogative to keep growing. When you find yourself at a moment like that, and say there is, this might be a bit of a hypothetical, but if there's a new data center that you feel you need from a business reason, and you need gas, or even coal, in the case of some data centers out there, to power it, are you comfortable signing on with a gas provider or even a coal plant to supply some of that power?
So first, just to give you a little bit of the history lesson of why we are where we are, and as you asked about the energy situation, the grid hasn't grown for several decades. You know, you sort of had this sort of constant energy, grid for quite some time. But now, for good reasons, for economic growth reasons, the grid needs to grow, not just for data centers. I think the data from the IEA is like globally data centers, energy or electricity demand is going to go from 1.5% of total demand to around 3% by 2030. It's still an important source of growth. It's also coming from buildings and transportation. So really at this pivotal moment where the grid needs to grow and it needs to increase. So things like investing in 3 Mile Island and the Crane Energy Center there is really important because that's a way to bring on, in an economic way, new growth into that region. To your direct question around natural gas, it's a great one because as we build out these data centers and we need to bring the power online to fuel them, we also have our sustainability commitment. And our commitment is to be carbon negative by 2030. And a key part of that is to ensure that where we go and where we add power to those grids, we match every kilowatt of power we're bringing onto those grids with carbon-free energy resources. And so that remains our commitment. It remains that, for any grid that we go into, we want to do that. The other key piece, though, is because it's about reliability. We want to make sure that our customers, and this is everything from hospitals to students to, you name it, nonprofits, that they have access to their data centers and the data that they need. And that reliability is really important to have. And so as we add more of those kilowatts of carbon-free, the benefit we see happening is that we're helping to decarbonize those grid regions where we're adding that new capacity to it.
Kate, I'm thinking of the situation in Omaha, I believe it was, where the Omaha utility said it was going to keep a coal plant online in part to power data centers, some of which were being used by Google and Meta. Is that when you read that headline, when you see that, you hear that, I know that maybe it wasn't your personal decision. How does it sit with you, given Google's climate commitments? You hear then that coal plants are being kept online in these neighborhoods that have had a hard time with these plants to power these data centers.
Yeah, I would again come back to, we see the critical importance of getting clean, reliable, and affordable energy onto grids. We need to support this growth. And it's good to see load growth. That means our economies are growing. And as Melanie said, absolutely this is coming from data centers, but this is also coming from building electrifications, from electric vehicles, from onshoring of manufacturing. So we need to meet this moment effectively. And as I said, we signed contracts for 8 gigawatts of clean power last year. That is the tool that we have to continue to help to decarbonize grids. And then we will remain grid connected. So what that grid mix looks like, it depends on where we're operating, but we can bring forward our purchasing power and also work with utilities. We've developed new rate structures like the Clean Transition Tariff. We've deployed this for the first time with NV Energy to get new enhanced geothermal online. This is a new rate structure that allows us to plan directly with the utility to get clean energy online to meet our demand. So those are the kinds of tools and structures that can help us do this smartly.
Yeah, and just at a personal level, though, I mean, I know you care about this stuff. You're the first chief sustainability officer for the United States during the Obama administration. When you see this sort of paradox, right, we got to keep growing the business, and in Omaha, for example, that means coal. How does that make you feel?
I mean, what I'm focused on is we've had all these technology solutions. I used to work at the Department of Energy, for example, that I've been describing, like advanced nuclear, enhanced geothermal, even demand response, that have been effectively kind of sitting on the shelf because they haven't been able to scale. They haven't had investment dollars to get out there. Those will be transformative. We can't power the grid of the future with old technology, and we need these technologies to win and to scale. And so I think the fact that we now have a moment to play a role in these first-of-a-kind projects and getting them out in the world, That for me is incredibly meaningful, and that's really what I'm staying focused on.
Okay. I think AI is on everyone's mind these days, and for just a hot take, do you feel like AI has a bad rap right now, Melanie?
It depends. I think, as you know, I am a lawyer by training. The answer you should expect.
There's no way I could tell that.
No way. It depends. Like I said, I think in some places people think there's a lot of hype around it, and that it is a futuristic thing that is about to come into fruition. And then I go to universities, I meet with students, I meet with power users of AI products who are just showcasing the most amazing uses already in the wild today for how AI is transforming their own lives in a beneficial way. And so I think for those people that are actually using it, they realize, wow, this is advancing scientific discovery in a way that I've never seen it before, from healthcare. I mean, we can go into details there. But I think that's really, to me, those people are just, you talk to them, they're like, wow, I can't believe it can do this. It can help me get through email faster. Yeah. You know, so it's for those that are using it, I think they are really excited about the moment.
And what about from a climate perspective? Do you feel like the climate world, activists, other people working to try to bend the curve on emissions, have sort of homed in on AI as the boogeyman of the day?
I do think there's some misunderstanding in the ecosystem, because I think that we don't actually have in the wild large AI data centers running. So you have existing data centers, and then what we announced last week, which is in Wisconsin, which will be the world's largest, most powerful AI data center in the world, which will come online next year. So with that, you're seeing all this new innovation around the water use, the cooling technologies, the energy use within that data center, but nobody has that data today because that data center is not up and running. So a lot of the assessments that you see out there are sometimes taking a straight line figure without what we're seeing, which is the incredible and the quickly evolving innovation that's happening on cooling technologies using far less water, in some cases zero water for cooling chips in some data centers. So that's where I think there's a lot of focus, because there is some unknowns out there, and it's tough, to be honest. But you know, being inside a company like ours, where I get to see some of this information, I get to work with the innovators that are doing this great work, I can't help but be optimistic and get excited about what's to come. But I understand that there is the hype.
Okay. Kate, same question to you. Does AI have a bad rap right now?
Yeah, I think that the way we've been approaching this is it's important. We're an information company, right? It's important to get useful information in people's hands to better understand both the environmental footprint of AI and also what are the use cases that it's offering us when it comes specifically to this issue.
And can AI help on emissions? Because I feel like it's always portrayed, and the headlines I read and sometimes the stories I write are about AI's impact on energy demand. Is there a case where it can actually sort of help bend the curve on emissions?
Absolutely. There was a recent study that was published in the journal Nature that showed that there's the potential for up to 5 gigatons of enabled emissions reductions by 2035 through AI solutions. And we are not only seeing that as a potential in 2035, but right now. One great example of that at Google is we've been working on aviation, hard to abate sector, 3% of global warming impact. 1/3 of that comes from aviation contrails. You've actually even written about this.
I wrote a story about this.
And we've worked to utilize AI to better understand why are contrails forming, and then to provide pilots an initial set of test flights with American Airlines with easy recommendations on how do you change your altitude to avoid a contrail formation. We were able to cut them in half. We're now working to scale this with Eurocontrol. They operate the largest airspace in Europe, with other airlines. And this is a software fix to an otherwise very hard to abate sector that could potentially reduce 0.5% of all global emissions, one AI-powered solution. So that gives me a lot of hope, and that's technology that we can deploy right now.
Thank you. Well, you get a sense of the potential, but also the challenges. Thank you very much, Kate and Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you.